Welcome to the Certified ChangeWorks System Coach Program. We're on Lesson 5, and this is a discussion session. And in our discussion sessions, we take what you learned in our discovery session and talk about practical applications. And we have a treat for you today. Instead of some of our faculty members, I have T. Falcon Napier himself joining, and we're going to have a little discussion here about energies and resonance. Welcome, T.
Thanks so much, Dave. So I wanted to join this call because I think of all of the elements that we want our certified team members to learn. This is the one that seems to have the most history behind it. And so I think it might be interesting for the students on the program to hear a little bit about that history and how we use bits and pieces of it in our work with our different sorts of clients. So in the good old days, we referred to this as comparative human typological analysis. I know that's 4 rather large words, but what it really just means is that over the course of time, countless attempts have been made to describe how humans operate. And those attempts to make that description have given rise to all sorts of different psychometric tools and personality tests and values inventories and you name it. Well, as I said during the discovery session, very often those people created these maps of humanity. And what I set out to do when I began this work some almost 40 years ago now was to merge them all together, because they were all brilliant in their own way. I wanted to put them all together. And each of them would create these maps of humanity, and ultimately from those maps of humanity they would draw whatever conclusions they were trying to draw. But as we integrate them all together into our understanding of productive tension and specifically of the ChangeWorks system, what we really are looking for is not so much someone's type, but instead looking at those different typologies more from the energetic or the idea about how they resonate. And so that's what we want to do, is talk a little bit about how do we go about using some of these different layers to help people understand the energy they're feeling around whatever it is they happen to be facing, whatever change they're trying to make.
And what's interesting, T, about that is we have on occasion, many occasions, when a new tool comes out, one of the things we do is, how does it fit on the change grid? And that's what's interesting, is that, we can always it always seems to fit in one way or another because of the merging you've done from all these other tools. So
right. And it's really interesting. Even today, I was talking with a client and they'd been exposed to a model, and I don't remember the name of the model, but this basic model said that there were 4 different ways that people have of looking at their life's work. And I believe the 2 dimensions as they described them were whether or not you knew what you wanted to do and whether or not you were actively doing it. And so he said, so some people know what they want to do and they're actively doing it. They're out there making it happen. Well, that's all they had to say. And my head went like, I know where that is on the change grid.
Sounds out grid to me.
Right. Yeah. They were saying like, and there are other people who say, well, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm out there making life happen because, and he was talking in that regard about people who kind of inherit a profession. So the family has always had a business, or every generation has always been doctors. So there's not a whole lot of intentionality behind it other than defaulting into whatever that role happens to be. So as he described these 4 different combinations, I went like, well, that's a very simple overlay on the change grid. So that's yet another model. And again, I don't know whose model it is, but we're up to over 400 plus models now, and they all have merit in and of themselves, but they have even more value when you can overlay them. Now, I'm bringing that up for our students just to say that we don't ever want you to think about the change grid as being something different. What the change grid is a collection of everything that's already out there. And so for the sake of today's discussion session, what I want you to kind of think about is how often you're working with a client. who already has some sort of an experience with another type of psychometric tool or personality test or inventory or whatever, parlor games sometimes they take the shape of. Any of those familiar models that they may bring to your attention will find a way to resonate on the change grid, assuming they have any real merit. And by and large, they all do. So I think that's really good when you can say, don't put that aside. Instead, let's put that on top of
Yeah,
what
let's
it is that we're
incorporate.
here to talk about. Let's incorporate. Let's do what I said a slide ago. Let's do a merging of brilliance.
Right.
And so that's where this came from. Now, because models take different shapes, some of those models divide humanity into 4 groups, and some divide humanity into, if there's 8 groups, there's 9 groups, there's 16 groups, there's all kinds of different things. You end up with this diagram that everyone's seeing on the screen right now, and we call this is the change grid. But rather than thinking of it as a single diagram, think of it instead of as you looking through a stack of transparent layers. And each of those layers has a different set of these geometric lines. And on that layer, you can kind of integrate whatever model. So there's a layer that divides it into 4. And you see the 2 diagonal purple lines that divide the change grid into 4 quadrants. Well, I promise you, and as you know, Dave certainly has even more experience with this than I do, because Dave is certified in several quadrant-based typing systems. And so we can tell you that they will all overlay one way or another, but we are not using the change grid to describe someone's personality, if for no other reason than there are already, quite literally, hundreds of models that are doing a fine job of that.
And so right now, T, someone going through our course, as they're listening to this, probably only has really been exposed, other than the last discovery session, to layer 0, maybe layer 1 for sure, the 5 levels of tension. So
Right.
we're gonna get into the other layers tonight, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And now keep in mind that the 5 levels of tension is the layer that is speaking most directly to this idea that people are experiencing a certain level of energy around whatever the situation happens to be. So some things that are going on in their life, they're in power about, and some they're up in stress about, and maybe a whole bunch they're downgraded in power, apathy. But these are 5 very clear levels of energy or levels of tension. When we go to the other layers, though, people who developed the models on those other layers weren't trying to say that this is a dynamic thing that is activity specific. They were trying instead saying, like, no, this is who you are. And so if we look at the quadrant based one, we would describe these quadrants as outgrid, upgrid, ingrid, and downgrid, just based on the cardinal direction that they happen to be positioned in. But we can overlay all those quadrant-based personality typing systems. And I think in this day and age, we would be hard-pressed to find a client who doesn't have some experience with quadrant-based personality typing. Whether they've gone through DISC or they figured out which of the 4 houses in Harry Potter they belong to, everyone seems to have had some experience with quadrant-based personality typing. So Dave, talk a little bit about your own experience in that and the clients you work with who are already versed in quadrant-based personality typing.
No, I would think this is probably the most common one. And so, you have other products like People Map, working with a client now that uses that. The CVI profile is also 4 quadrants, and they might all be a little bit different in terms of some of the nuances, some of the certainly some of the nomenclature. But again, when you bring it back to this and what we're doing from an energetic standpoint, they all overlay.
Exactly. And so,
change grid.
right. So, for example, you were talking about People Map. I believe the outgrid label for the People Map model would be leader. If I remember, there's leader, free spirit. Is it thinker or analytical, or I think it's
task.
Tasker.
Yes.
Right. And then I forget what's on the inside. Is it
there
people?
is there is a people. Yeah, there is a people.
Okay, so people, free spirit, leader, task.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So let's say that we were working with a client who had in the people map system tested out as being a leader. So that's an outgrid type, and I think this diagram is just as good as any to show it. Obviously, we have many different ways of showing each one of these layers, but it'll work here. Now, here's a couple things that I like to bring to their attention. The first thing I want to bring to our client's attention is that they're a whole person. Just because someone tests out to be a leader or a whatever does not mean that they don't have any of the attributes of the other three quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
They just happen to have a preponderance of attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that resonate so strongly with one of those four quadrants that they end up being declared to be that particular type. And
Mm-hmm.
so rather than try to argue with them about that, I say, what I know for certain is you are a whole person. And as a whole person, you have every location on this change grid available to you. And depending on what circumstances you find yourself in, you may display the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors of any of these other three quadrants. But you're always going to display them from that essence of whatever your personality happens to be. And what I mean by that is this. If you test out as a leader, but for whatever reason, you have an activity that's plotting upgrade. So you rated your ability as being on the lower end of things and the challenge as being on the higher end of things. You end up plotting upgrade. Now, upgrade in the people maps system would be the free spirit. To put another one in, if we looked at DISC, outgrid would be the D, the dominant, and
Mm-hmm.
then upgrade would be the I, the influential
Yes.
sort of type. And so what I want to say is that the way that influence is experienced by someone who tests out as a dominant is different than the way someone who tests out to be an I experiences an I.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now,
Mm-hmm.
let me see if that can make sense for everyone. Um, so I'm just saying that you will always be you. Make no mistake about it. You are you, and whatever personality you seem to have developed, that's your personality. Is it going to change? My belief is that over the course of time, based on certain circumstances, yeah, your personality could absolutely change. But is it going to change in some dramatic way between now and dinner, or between now and next week, or now and the holidays? That's unlikely to happen. So change at the personality level is something that's going to happen very slowly. Well, there's a few circumstances that might be abrupt. So for the average person,
Right.
their
Right.
personality is going to remain pretty much
Pretty
consistent for
much
a
the
good long
same,
while to
unless
come.
there's some kind of traumatic event, usually, or something like that, that
Right,
may change
right.
some things. Now, just a couple questions here, T. Number one is, um, and I guess it's more of a point than a question. I'll just share a client experience I had, with using Disc, which is one of the
Hmm.
main tools I use. And the person came out, and by the way, a lot of these tools like this that are four quadrant based have really kind of emerged or evolved into a circumplex map, so
Yes.
they can get a little bit of what you're saying of, okay, yeah, you're primarily an S, but you bleed into these other ones. They can show that in the circumplex
Yeah.
map, right? So they're trying to kind of cover that in maybe better ways than they have in the past.
Yeah.
um,
Good.
but this one client, is an S, is that's kind of our Ingrid, ties in with our Ingrid energy, so gets along with people, very approachable, all that stuff. Typically, high S's tend to avoid conflict. They want everyone to get along. So, and when he read that part of his report, he says that doesn't resonate with me at all when it comes to conflict. And so, everything else did resonate with him. And that's what we're talking about. We're saying, the change grid will pick something up situationally,
Yep.
because of someone's upbringing, whatever, maybe, they're not going to be the textbook S or D or I or C.
Right.
So,
Right.
where the change grid, if you had an activity based on dealing with conflict, he would probably grid out, outgrid or something like that
Hmm.
instead of in-grid. Um, so that's an interesting point, and that's why I like to use those tools in tandem, because I think you get a little more information, a lot more information, in terms of the nuances of how someone will work out and behave situationally. Um,
Absolutely. And I was just going to throw in that while I certainly think that, we talk about our role as coaches and human development professionals. It's wonderful to better understand our clients at that essential personality sort of level. And I think it's very interesting and useful for people to understand that about themselves. But in the real work of helping people make some sort of a change, we just have to accept people just the way they are.
mhm,
And whether they are behaving or again, I talk about attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors, whether they are operating in type or for whatever reasons out of type, I don't really need to make that distinction whether it's in or out of type. I just accept them just the way they are, and then we kind of move forward from that perspective. So, for example, what I would say, in fact, I said that to the client this morning. I said, "So I know you test out as this leader type. Does that mean you never have a task moment? You never have a people moment? You never
mhm,
have a free spirit moment?" And they go, "Well, no, of course I'm all these things."
mhm.
I said, "You're all these things?" And they said, "Yeah, it depends on the situation." And I went,
There you go.
"Precisely." And so rather
Exactly.
than looking at the person, what I hope all of our students are understanding is that we're not looking at the person, we're looking at the situation. We're
Right.
looking at the activity, and how those different clients may be experiencing a particular spot on the change grid could be somehow influenced by their personality. So, for example, um, if I said, in fact, Dave, I'll give you a little test here. So
Uh-oh.
all human beings, all human beings, I don't care what their personality type is, all human beings have had their fair share of what I'm going to call 9-9 or 10-10 sort of moments. Now,
Mhm.
to be at 9-9 or 10-10, you have to rate your level of ability as quite high, again, 9 or 10. But you also have to say that so 9 or a 10. So yeah, you're capable, but you're being tested right now. So tell me, Dave, from your client experience, if you've had a client that is one of these big driver types,
Oh yeah.
what does a 9-9-10-10 feel like to them, and how do they kind of deal with it? How do they respond to that? And how is that different than, say, an amiable person who is generally speaking more of an in-grid energetically, but even though they're in-grid energetically, they still have their own version of a 9-9 or 10-10. How is an amiable's 9-9-10-10 different than a driver's 9-9-10-10?
Are you saying so they're at the same place in the change grid?
In their
Um,
head, yeah, in their head, they both perceive themselves as being a 9, a 10 on the ability
right,
scale,
right,
facing a
right,
9 or a 10 on the challenge. But because their personality is different, how do
right.
they, how
Yeah,
might they experience situation differently?
yeah. I would say for a driver, they kind of live in that place, so that it would feel more normal for them. It wouldn't be stressing them out. It would be exciting for them. Or for the amiable person, it could be something that stresses them out. If they had to do that for a long period of time,
Hmm.
they may actually get sick. So that would be my read on it.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's like the amiable type would experience that as an out of type experience. And so it is definitely a growth experience for them. It's a stretch sort of a situation for them. But it's not something that they would eagerly do. Now, again, the amiable tends to be far more interested in people than in accomplishing particular tasks. So when they get all 9-9-10-10, which by the way, if we looked at the adjective map, you guys will all be learning about that in detail as your training continues, but we have this map that's got adjectives scattered all over it, and the adjectives you find at 9-9 or 10-10 are about being very confident and very focused and very determined and very, very clear, willing to get in, attack the situation head on, and all this sort of stuff. Well, obviously, someone who is, well, let's do this, an A-type personality is going to display that moment in a very different way than a B-type personality
Hmm.
would.
Hmm.
So that's it. So again, I just wanted to say all this just to say that every human being is a whole change grid. All of these spots belong to all of us,
Hmm.
but how we are actually experiencing them may differ based on what our actual personality may be. And there's also cultural distinctions that might come into play. There's also diplomatic situations that come into play. So, for example, if I am the owner of a company and I'm in an outgrid moment, I may present myself in a very different way than if I am a junior associate and I am experiencing that outgrid sort of moment. Um,
Absolutely. Hmm.
because there's politics going on now, and
Sure.
I got to be diplomatic and strategic and all that sort of thing. Where if I'm the owner, I can just say what I feel like saying, and you know.
Let me ask you this. So, because this has come up with some of the people I've coached on Change Grid and helped with readings and things like that. Um, and let's go with this scenario. So you have an analytical person that is responding to the Change Grid,
Hmm.
and I'll have someone say, "Well, gosh, I don't see really anything very far up grid
Hmm.
in there." Now they might have stuff mid grid,
Sure.
if you point where that is,
Hmm.
maybe a little bit in the bottom of power stress. That might be as high as it goes on the grid.
Yep.
Uh, you know, speak to that, T. Because I think people say, well, there's nothing really, that they're stressed out about or keeping them up at night. And
Yeah.
what would
Well,
you say to that?
it's completely relative. And so
Hmm.
one of the things that we can sometimes do, and I don't know quite how to depict it, but if everyone looks at the screen, you can see my little pointer squiggling around here. Um, let's say that I'm looking at a change grid and I want to know what someone's extremes look and feel like. If I said to them, tell me about a situation that's really causing you some anxiety right now, some real stress, something that's really pressuring you right, and they tell me about it. I say, okay, now rate your ability to do that. And they go, well, that's a 4. And I said, and how challenging is it going to be? And they said, well, it's about a 7. Well, 4 and 7, they just told me what their idea of an upgrade experience is.
Right,
They're
right,
nowhere near upgrade.
right.
Okay. And then I said, now tell me something that you just find very routine, very kind of boring. Now, generally speaking, everyone will give you something similar. Checking my email. All right, how do you rate your ability to do that? A 12.
Yeah,
How
right.
challenging is that? A 0. All right,
Yeah.
so we all seem to we all seem to share this lowest spot of the change grid in common. But that idea about what really stresses out changes. So I could just say, all right, fine. I now know what a high point is in their reality. Again, for everyone's reminder, um, the real change grid doesn't exist on a screen. The real change grid doesn't exist on a piece of paper. The real change grid is in your head. You've
Right.
always had it. You always will. And so I just go like, all right, I just need to rescale my diagram then, because that highest item they're reporting is going to feel the most upgrid, even though they may not be plotting upgrid. So it's all relative. It's all relative.
Right, and that's what I was trying to get to, is that, yeah, and that's where sometimes knowing the personality type can be helpful. But
Yeah,
again, I think the bigger issue to always remember is that this is a tool of conversation.
that's right.
So, you
That's right.
know,
And that's what I like to do. I mean, I don't want to be someone who's sitting in front of a crystal ball that happens to be shaped like a change grid and read their fortune for them. I go like, no, this is really you talking to you about you. You guys remember from your last lesson, we talked about the oracle of the self. And
hmm.
so this is really, the change grid is the client talking to the client about themselves, about issues that are going on. We're just here to help interpret what it is they're looking at, to help them to explore that, understand it, make some decisions around it, and put in place whatever action items they might feel would help them. And so this is always about us asking better quality questions to get to the essence of whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, let me kind of flip a little bit. I'm just going to flip through a lot of these slides that you guys saw during your discovery session. By the way, those of you who are seeing this for the first time, you need to do the discovery session before you do the discussion session. So anyway, there's all kinds of personality systems just around here.
Sunshine
All these
yellow. I like
characters.
that one.
Oh yeah. Sunshine yellow. The danger zones. We talked about all these. So all these different sorts of things come along. Oh, by the way, Dave, this is probably what you're talking about. Some of the more the most recent evolutions in disk. In fact, I believe this
Mm-hmm.
came from what they called the disk card system, and even
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be a good 10 12 years old now. They added this element of color and added a little bit of a different word, so we still have
Mm-hmm.
well, this was DISO. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
the energy comes between the motivator energy and all that. This is a different layer for a different time. Oh, yeah, this is
Yeah.
where the Myers-Briggs stuff starts. Oh,
Right.
no, sorry. This was the discard thing.
Okay.
So you have types, and in between you have behaviors. So if you are in between the driver type and a communicator type, or the I type,
Mm-hmm.
you would not be at all surprised to find out that in between you're assertive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're outgrid, stuck between outgrid and downgrid, you'll come across as being very controlled. If you're between downgrid and ingrid, you'll come across as passive.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And now
interesting.
disc has, if you go back to that one with the 8, I think there's 8 there, or 9.
Yeah, there's 8. No,
Um,
8.
I think they split them in half now, so there's actually 16
Yep,
going
yep.
around a circle. So,
Right. So it's becoming more and
uh,
more of a circumplex. Yeah.
one
The
is
most
called a pioneer, one is,
Yep,
called a.
the most elaborate circumplex diagram we've ever discovered was called TAG, the Transactional Awareness Game, and it
Mhm.
was developed by Thomas Odom, I believe, Odom. If I'm not mistaken, he's both a theologian and um, I don't know if it was psychology or sociology, but nevertheless, he created the most elaborate circumplex diagram I've ever seen. And it probably has, I would say 3, maybe 4 dozen little
Mm.
slices all around this giant circle. And the diagram, by the way, I actually have one up there on one of these shelves. It's like 3 feet by 3 feet. And even then, it's difficult to read. So
Wow.
lots of detail. Yeah. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah.
Fell out of vogue for obvious reasons.
Yes.
All right, so let's just kind of go on to and this, by the way, was the this is the Let's Explore the Leonard method. So the Leonard methods was let's explore open, open, neutral, analytical, decisive, relational, because that
Mhm.
spells Leonard. So the LE was let's explore, and then ONARD, open, neutral, analytical, decisive, relational. Um, yeah, and then interesting, and then the orientations that would fall between them. So
Mhm.
there have been lots of 9 type models that have come out. Even those of you who are familiar with Enneagrams, the Enneagram model ended up being the most difficult one to integrate because it has a very unique shape to it. And so
Mhm.
rather than trying to make the shape overlay, we just said, well, let's instead look at the different descriptors of the 9 different points and see where those 9 different points might overlay on the change grid. And you can
Mhm.
see it's in a very strange pattern, but if you were to study it, you go like, no, that resonates, that
Mhm.
overlays.
Yeah, that's a real hot one now.
It is. It is. I
It's
mean,
a, it's a hot tool right now.
all these tools do kind of rise and fall in the
Mhm.
awareness of people in our line of work, and so
Right.
it's all fine. Now, my personal favorite, though, is this idea about the energies,
Mhm.
and so I would say to all of our students that even though the change grid has many, many different layers, I seem to spend 99% of my time no exaggeration. Just talking about layers 1, 5, and 8, which would be the 5 levels of tension. These energies, as you're looking at on the screen right now, and the engagement rings. I seem to, that's what I tend to spend the vast majority of my time sharing with my clients and leading them in some discussion around it. So what I think would be great, I mean, again, this is a discussion session. I thought it might be great to just talk a little bit about how do we go about just using these layers to help a client to better understand what's going on with them. And so now this particular layer, and by the way, we have a simpler diagram. Let me just go ahead and get rid of all those colors just so you can focus on it. So we talked earlier about there being the 4 quadrants, and you can see that if I drew a big X in the middle of this, I'd have 4 quadrants. But we've divided each of those 4 quadrants into 4 sub-quadrants. Now, the primary energy is shown by the word in all capitals. So all 4 of these are driver as the primary energy. These are expressive. These are amiable. The 4 down here are analytical. And then the second word, the secondary energy, is shown with a capital letter and everything else lowercase. So not all drivers are created equally, or not all driver energy is the same. There's a driven driver energy, an expressive driver energy, an amiable driver energy, and an analytical driver energy. And so how I use this with my clients is that I start by explaining to them, even before we look at their change grid, or, you know, we do a great deal of work with clients using the principles of tension management without even using a change grid. So off-grid application, I could still do this. And I'd say to them, let me quickly explain to you what these 4 different energies are really all about. And I'd say to them, now the driver energies, just think about that word, means driver. What does a driver want? So I'll let Dave, you can be the client, although you already know the answers. What does a driver want?
Driver wants results.
Wants results. They want to go somewhere. They're driving. They're trying to push something. They're moving forward. So the driver energy wants to get somewhere. They want to go somewhere. They want to do something, have something, be something, whatever. Now, the expressive energy wants to what?
Impress, communicate, charm.
Exactly. They want to do something that is expressive. And so they want to either display all kinds of outward sorts of emotional and social sorts of cues, like you were talking about charming and being influential and all that sort of stuff. They like to display it. They also like to be around it. So they want to be expressive, and they like being around expressive people and situations. So the expressive energy wants to feel something and wants to share what it's feeling with others. So it tends to be more out there and growing. Now, again, we're not talking about personality types. We're talking about the energy. Now, the amiable energy wants to care about
nurturing,
something.
yes.
Nurture, right, exactly. And, you know, look out for that. And it tends to be more people-oriented than situation or thing-oriented. And the analytical energy wants to know something, wants to understand something. So that's what, so we go about those 4 basic energies. I want to do something. I want to feel something. I want to care about something. I want to know something. Now, that secondary energy tells me how they want to go about doing it. So now, but let's go back to working with a client. I would say, you know, we're going to look at where you are on the change grid. But before we take a look at that, I'd be curious for you to tell me, when it comes to this particular activity, this particular situation that you're in, which energy do you think would most naturally support you in accomplishing whatever it is you're trying to accomplish? So let's say, for example, they were trying to land the job of their dreams. Okay, great. Which of these 4 energies do you think at this stage in your deployment, which of these energies do you think is going to serve you best in helping you to get the job of your dreams? The driver energy, the expressive energy, the amiable energy, or the analytical energy?
As a primary?
The primary.
I would say driver. because
driver
I want to make it
because
happen.
you
I want
want to make it happen, and that's it. So we want everyone to go like, it's that simple. I just want to know, do you as the client, are you trying to make something happen? Do you want to feel something, care about something, or know something? So they say driver, and I say, okay, but what kind of a driver energy? So do you think a driven driver energy? So again, the secondary energy tells me how you're going to proceed.
yeah, I would
So
say expressive if I play the client here.
okay, so let's explore each of these four and see if you want to stay expressive or, and again, it's going to be very situational. So
Sure.
for example, the driven driver energy would say, I want to go somewhere, I want to get something, I want to do something, and I'm going to do that by doing it. And so they could be very aggressive, very forceful, very dominant, very directive. And there may be certain circumstances where that energy would serve their interests well. The expressive driver, on the other hand, knows they're trying to accomplish something, but they're going to accomplish it by being more personable, by being more animated, more energized, more motivated, more excited, more charismatic, more influential, more persuasive. It's motivating. It's all those other kinds of expressive words. And that could serve them very well in a given set of circumstances. The amiable driver is going to, they want to make something happen, make no mistake about it. They want to make something happen, but they want to make it happen by caring about something, by being a person of mission and purpose and vision that cares about the client, cares about the company, cares about the work that's being done, and they're going to present themselves accordingly. That could serve them well, depending on what circumstances they're actually in.
And
And
T,
the
is it?
analytical.
I'm
Mhm.
sorry. Is it true that they might also want to do that with other people as well,
They
like
may
with a
very well
team?
want to do. Absolutely. They may very well want to do it with other people. In fact, they're greatest if that amiable driver energy is really what's governing them. They may make their decision about the best company to work for based more on the people than on anything else, the
Hmm.
relationships and all that. Now, the analytical driver wants to know something. So they want to get the best job they possibly can. And how they're going to go about doing that is by studying something, by exploring it, understanding it. So they're really going to do their homework and investigate everything and ask all kinds of questions and be very like, why do I see spreadsheets and checklists and all this sort of thing in their analysis? They're scrutinizing
Hmm.
whatever the opportunity happens to be. And so the correct answer to this is really, well, where are you in the whole situation? Who are you talking to? You're
Hmm.
trying to land the job of your dreams. Well, overall, landing the job of your dreams is definitely going to be best supported by that driver energy. So I kind of know you need to be in the outgrid quadrant to make that happen.
Hmm.
But I would want to break the activity down to be a little more granular before determining what the ideal um, energy would be for all the little pieces
Hmm.
of the strategy that are going to lead me to that outcome.
Hmm.
So, for example, let's say they haven't interviewed with anybody yet. I might say to them, then at this stage, the analytical driver energy is probably going to serve you best
Hmm.
because you got to do your homework.
Right. Got to do some research. Right.
Do some research, figure out who's out there, what's the lay of the land, and then um, now if it's time to do some outreach and I'm whether I'm making phone calls, sending out emails and resumes or whatever, maybe that's a little bit more of the expressive driver energy. Or if I'm at an initial interview sort of a situation, um, but with the analytical driver energy, interview as well as the expressive driver energy might interview.
Hmm.
Now, I guess it depends. If I'm interviewing for a job as an accountant or an actuary, maybe the analytical driver energy would be viewed more positively by those who are choosing the
Hmm.
candidates.
Right.
But if I'm interviewing for a sales position, why do I expect they'd like to see a little bit of that expressive energy and maybe a little extra dab of that driver energy? thrown in there.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
right. And so, where if I'm going after an HR position, um, maybe the driven driver energy would be considered a little bit too forceful, too directive for an HR sort of a role. So this is where I think that our greatest value comes into play with our clients, because we can help them break down the big goal into each of those incremental sorts of goals, break it down into the actual tasks and say, all right, where's the ideal situation? Where's the ideal situation for you to be? Where on the grid would you do this most naturally? Now, I like to do that with clients so that then I can say, all right, let's take a look at your change grid. So let's say that they had an interview coming up a couple of days from now with the first level interview. We'll say that's going to be with whoever's in HR, whoever's in recruiting. So they really
Hmm.
aren't talking to anybody in management, leadership, etc. So
Hmm.
um, so we say, now I look at their change grid, and right now they're plotting, they say their ability for that interview is an 11, and the challenge is a 2. So now that puts them very far down grid without going back to the levels of tension. They
Hmm.
are in apathy. They're an analytical. Now that what that tells me is that right now, energetically, they've either A, have the resume, or believe that the resume is not to be worried about. It's all taken care of. They
Hmm.
believe they've got all the credentials. They believe they've got all the understanding. They know whatever it is they need to know about the company. They believe that they know what the company is going to care about them. So to be an analytical this far down grid, um, tells me they think that their pre-work is done.
Hmm.
Well, if I'm their coach, let's say I really am a career coach, I might say to them, you may just be underestimating.
Right.
Let's do a little role play. Uh,
Exactly. Exactly. I was going to say, there's different ways as a coach you can move them to, again, we're kind of talking about ideal locations here, right?
that's right.
And again, it's kind of like I don't have to convince you. I can just meet you where you are, and then we can figure that out together in terms of where
Exactly.
you should be. So, I mean, role playing is a great way to expose. Do you really know it as well as you think you do? So,
Exactly right. Exactly
you know.
right. And so, and again, because I said before I even show you your grid, let's talk about where the best energy would be for interviewing with that, with whoever that is. And they might say, well, I definitely need to be an analytic. I definitely need to be a driver because I want the job.
Hmm.
But I need that analytical energy because they're going to ask me only the nuts and bolts questions. Do I have the education? Do I have a clean record? Do I have whatever it is that those little things that first level interview screener is really going to care about?
Hmm.
And so they might say, so I think I need to be an analytical driver. Well, then I could show them their grid and say, well, right now you're an analytical. So what do you think we might want to do? And
Hmm.
hopefully they're going to realize that they need to boost the driver energy up a bit.
Hmm.
And then we can obviously apply whatever our techniques are to help them to move into that. And certainly
Hmm.
role playing is a great way to do that.
Yes,
So
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And it is. It's like you use the word underestimate. I mean, that's the thing. If we raise the bar and
Hmm.
say, look, this is important, you know,
That's
and
right.
you might have all the goods, but you have to make sure they know you have all the goods,
That's
you
right.
know.
Absolutely
So
right. Absolutely right.
so there's
And
all
I think
kinds of ways coaches do this, but to know kind of the orientation of where the client is versus where they need to be, that's where I think the power of this tool comes in.
absolutely. And I'll also add to that that person in that an analytical may not even acknowledge that they are in a competitive situation.
Hmm. I agree.
So are they just reporting the facts, or do they realize that they need to distinguish themselves from the other candidates? So are they looking for whatever really separates them from the crowd? Can they answer the question, why should I hire you instead of somebody else? And I think that as we start to apply those sorts of questions, those, as we call them, upgrade maneuvers, we're
Hmm.
going to end up having the person move a little bit more powerfully and purposefully to an area on the change grid that's a
Yeah.
little more likely.
Well, T, someone plotting in this portion of the change grid, wouldn't you say they're pretty much thinking I can just show up for the call and wing it?
Oh yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so
They can phone it in. They
right.
can phone it in. Yeah, and it's like and unfortunately, that's not the situation they are likely to find themselves in. But those of us who have done coaching with people who are on a career path, a quest for the ultimate job, yeah, there's a whole lot of awareness that ends up coming into play. So,
And I think this, when we're moving a client upgrade, I think that's one of the most powerful things coaches can do. I mean, a lot of
mhm,
our coaching just naturally moves people downgrade, right? We take people that are
right.
stressed out, underconfident, those things, and we encourage them. We do all kinds of things. This is where I think some of the more powerful coaching takes place, because here you have to have the fortitude to sometimes challenge the client,
Hmm,
often
hmm.
challenge the client, and inspire them.
Well,
So,
right. Right. In fact, the upgrade maneuvers, and again, for all of you that are listening to the discussion session, this may be something that you've already learned in the discussions. But the upgrade maneuvers are to increase the standards against which you are measuring, however you're defining okay.
mhm,
It is to change the task in some slight or profound way. It is to awaken the emotions associated with the desired level of productive tension. And the last one is about boosting accountability.
mhm,
So, certainly through good questioning, I can do 3 out of those 4, and the fourth one, the accountability thing, is really just about me reaching some sort of an agreement with my client about how they want me to support them in doing those things that need to be done in the time frame that they've chosen.
that's right.
So,
That's right.
yeah. So now there's one other layer I want to talk about before our time's up. And so for you guys to kind of really understand this, I'm going to flip back real quick. I want you to notice where the analytical is on the grid. So again, way down here, and notice the analytical driver a little bit north of halfway up the side here. Because I'm going to come over here to the other layer I love. This is layer 8 on the engagement rings. So right now, that client is plotting in downgrid awareness or even hypo awareness. Hypo awareness means that the awareness they have about it is at a subconscious kind of level. So where awareness, and again, this is a review. If you've listened to the dialogue session, then you already know this, or the discovery session, you already know this. So the awareness means I am aware, consciously aware that X is happening. And hypo-awareness is that even though consciously I'm not aware of it, somehow or another I'm still perceiving it as at a less than conscious level, whether that's subconscious or maybe even unconscious. While you're sleeping, you are still able to monitor certain things that are going on in your environment. So anyway, so right now that's where they're at. So this idea about going in for this interview, they're down in downgrid awareness and hypo awareness, which is kind of like a yeah, I know, I'm aware of it. Yeah, fine. Yeah, I got to go for an interview. Yeah, I'm going for an interview. It's all very dismissed. Where
Right.
what we want them to be is up here in full engagement.
Hmm.
So if I go halfway up to 6, engagement, I just want them to be fully engaged when it comes time for that interview to happen. Because if they aren't engaged, they are disengaged. And if the person who is meeting with them is feeling that they are disconnected, disengaged, that doesn't bode well for the selection process going in their favor.
That's right.
So so if we kind of look at what we're trying to do as we start asking people these questions, let's say they're starting off right down there in hypo-awareness. It's it's below the radar. We need to ask them a question to at least get them to recognize, oh, it is on the radar. Okay. And then we need to ask questions that don't only make them aware that X is actually happening. We need to say, and as far as X is concerned, is there any sort of an intention you would care to formulate around this? So what's your intention for going on this interview? Just to go on it so you can cross it off your list and say, I went on an interview? What's your intention? Well, hopefully they're saying, well, my intention is to at least move forward on the decision about working for this company. So if it's a good match, I'd like to move forward on that. And if it's not a good match, then fine. I'd like to determine that so I can, move on. So, but that's my intention. I have to have an intention. So even asking the question, well, what's your intention? We've just done that second of the upgrade maneuvers, which is to change the task. It isn't about going on the interview. It's about determining whether or not this company is worthy of your talents. And if so, what it is that you need to be doing next in order to move this decision along the path to your selection. Now, once I know that you've got a strong intention towards it, now I can say, how are you going to actually turn that intention into some sort of an action plan? So, and this might be about what kinds of questions are you going to ask? And again, if I go back, where that engagement is, y'all look right here. See where I'm squiggling? Because I'm not even going to move my pointer. I'm just going to go back a couple of diagrams. That's an analytical driver. An analytical driver is going because they want to make something happen, but they're there to ask questions and to understand what's going on. They want to know something. And so if I only did that, just move them from being an analytical up to an analytical driver, at least now they've got some purpose for being there and are far more likely, going back to that thing, oops, my pointer just vanished, to be engaged.
Yes.
Asking good questions is a good way to indicate to a prospective employer that you are interested,
Right.
and at least learning more.
Excellent. Yeah. Great example.
Yeah. Yep. So again, it's great if they fill out a change grid, and honestly, if they do, then we're able to look at a lot of things simultaneously. But even just asking someone in a pure conversational sort of way about where an activity would best be performed or what energy would support them most, and then asking them where they are so you can see that there's a gap that needs to be closed. This is what it's really all about. And so it's interesting how much history is locked into this diagram, how many different models of human behavior have been integrated in order to bring us to the level of understanding that we have today. But the more, how to say, as complex as all that was, what's come out of it is something really pretty simple. And that is that people are energy, and how they are moving about their day and moving through their life is an expression of how they are managing that energy. And if we can help them to better understand what's going on with themselves energetically, and to better understand what the ideal type of energy may be in order for them to most naturally accomplish a particular activity, I think we can make life a lot smoother for them. And obviously, in the work of doing this as coaches, we can accomplish that almost entirely by asking good questions.
Absolutely.
But how do we know what questions to ask? By if I know where they're at and where they would ideally want to be, my questions are that much more obvious for me to be asking.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, good stuff, T. Thank you for joining us on this call.
It's been my pleasure. Okay then, so your next step, if you're sticking with the regular curriculum, as we've mapped it out, is to complete application session number 5. So for that, we've put together some questions we'd like you to ponder and choose 1 or 2 to answer for us. And once you've completed that, of course, we'd like you to attend one of the dialogue sessions with either myself or one of the other faculty members. And on that call, you can ask us whatever questions you might have, present us with whatever situations you might find interesting to explore. And from there, we'll help you best learn how to integrate all of this insight and material into the work that you're doing. So thanks so very much, everyone.